What to shoot? So finally, I'm sort of getting my way into the main portion of this talk, and how to shoot it. So as I said before, and I know there's lots of people here who'll be going, oh, I don't want to photograph people. Photographing people underwater is not just important, it is a fantastic challenge. And it doesn't mean, pictures of people underwater aren't necessarily artistically moribund. We can do interesting things with them, even in open water. You can create, hopefully, beautiful, attractive, interesting images. You can also create these very standard shots, but actually, one of the hardest shots to take really well in underwater photography are these two shots, these critter and animal shots. You only have to perhaps tune into the television at the moment and watch how difficult it can be for underwater moving pictures to create good shots of people with creatures, and to get both elements interacting well. So very simple images, not artistically interesting, yet can be a real challenge technically to produce, and therefore satisfying to produce them, both in tropical and in temperate water. Divers obviously also play a visual role in pictures, giving sense of scale and more often importantly background or perspective to wide angle shots. And this is again artistically a very boring, cliche type of underwater picture. Wide angle foreground, diver in the background, taken in the UK, already sold double page spread in the US. There's no, taken just a few weeks ago. Yes, it's boring. And yeah, from an artistic perspective, but these pictures really resonate with people, and so they are important to take. However, however unexciting perhaps they are. Visually, I think they're exciting, but to underwater photographers' eyes, they are a little bit ordinary. One of the great things, though, about model photography is we don't have to stick with the sort of classic layout of shots like the previous one. When you've got a model, or you've got a dive buddy who's willing to pose, or you can take it in turns to pose for each other. The guy in the previous picture, I was posing for him as well on that dive. It's not just a one-way street. When you have got models willing to pose, you can begin to take on more challenging pictures. That's an off-camera strobe shot, as I think I've shown this before at BSoUP. And here I have this is a shot where I've set up with my flash gun hidden behind this rock here to light the model. One of the great things about having a model is you can obviously direct them where you want them in the picture in a way that the fish is never going to do, to allow you to take on more creative shots, create unusual images, and use the model to help finish a shot that obviously needs a little bit extra. This is a split level shot taken in the UK. And this shot was taken very much to communicate the feeling of what it's like going underwater in the UK to a non-diver. People are the idea was the big split level shot shows you a landscape you're familiar with, coastline landscape from the southwest of England, and then the big shot continues underwater with the scene, and the diver there is helping a viewer think, oh, I could do that. I've been on that sort of beach. I could just dip underwater, go snorkeling maybe, see these jellyfish and all these nice pretty algae. There's a little fish there and that sort of thing. So, divers do play a very important role in livening these shots up. And they don't need to be so boring. Speed myself up a bit. Another important aspect for me in diving photography is showing divers in the way that we want them. And a lot of the time, a lot of wide-angle use of divers tends to be a little solid silhouette of a diver stuck in the background, legs nicely together, arms nicely down by their side. And that can look nice in the background of a picture, but you certainly don't want all your pictures to have that look. You might as well just get a marker pen and draw the diver on your dome board, so they're there ready in every shot. And so for me, I think one of the things that really changed my approach to diver photography was photographing free divers, seeing their grace in the water. And that was really important for me when I was working on the Art of Diving project, in terms of how I wanted to portray divers. And this is a shot that I think captures that for me, in that there's a grace to their movement. They're people. They're not just a model, a diver in the background, a silhouette. The interaction between the two divers here, even as silhouettes, you can read something of their body language. They become people. So, even when we're using divers small in the frame, it's nice for them to be a little bit more than that. But often I like to use divers and show them doing things in pictures, show people underwater active in pictures. Certainly if I'm going to light them up and have them in the frame, I don't want them just, you know, plonked there necessarily. You know, these days lots of divers carry little cameras, you know, great props to use, or divers watching interesting things going on, a pair of hamlets mating, and the diver watching them. And also showing divers having fun, you know, all this sort of standing there, you know, rigid as you can be. You know, it's not how people are. People enjoy themselves underwater, and these are things that I like to show people mucking about, having fun. They're important messages to get across in images. And it's not just a case of using people the same way all the time. These are all challenges you can give yourselves to show the weird underwater world and the people that go there. Right, to speed myself up again. To interest the general public in the underwater world, the other thing that's going to interest them just, you know, equally, almost as much as seeing people down there, are things made by people. And this is why wrecks can be particularly compelling subjects. And you know, I've found a lot of success publishing wreck pictures in mainstream media because these pictures have a resonance with non-divers, because non-divers can look at pictures of wrecks and recognise them. Well, they can recognise them when we shoot them in this way, and the Janus D, as you all know, is the classic example of this, where you can shoot the wreck from a perspective that makes it very recognisably a ship. When we can shoot these big wide shots of wrecks, when we've got the visibility, the lens and everything to allow us to take these shots, this is in Norway, it doesn't have to be a tropical shot. When we can produce recognisable images of ships, that's when people can say, that's a ship, I know it's a ship, or, you know, it doesn't have to be a ship obviously. When people can recognise the subject, suddenly it has this resonation. You know, in all honesty, pictures of boilers tend not to have the same resonation with people. Pictures of props, possibly. You know, it's when we get these big shots, that's where we've got the maximum impact. Or we've got features within a wreck like cars, trucks, bikes, that people can look at and recognise and feel that affinity with them. And again, even if you find wreck photography a bit boring, you can muck about with funny techniques and maybe create some different images that have something rather unusual about them, and perhaps challenge people to even know that they're underwater shots, which I think can be interesting. So, on to more exciting subject matter for us lot. We don't always have to pander completely to the audience. And that's really now into the sort of A-list charismatic creatures. And for many years, I was fascinated in photographing small, interesting creatures on the reef for me, and I try and photograph them in very unusual ways, and people sort of said, well done you, isn't that very good? And after I'd done a lot of that, I felt it was time I had to take on some of these larger, more charismatic creatures, because these are important pictures to have in terms of having that outreach from your shots. And obviously marine mammals are very good for that. This is a dolphin hunting a flying fish at night. And this is a nice group of dolphins here. I have to say dolphins aren't all that nice. And I'm going to show you now a picture taken 5 seconds before this picture. It's actually 4 seconds before this picture of the nice dolphins. And this is what the nice dolphins were doing just before. And this is actually a pair of male bottlenose dolphins forcing their affections on a different species of dolphin. And obviously, yeah, so they're not always quite as nice as they look, but interesting nonetheless. Anyway, my favourite of the marine mammals are definitely seals and sea lions. And I did consider doing an entire seal and sea lion talk, but I'm going to limit myself to just showing you a few. Wonderful creatures obviously have that natural affinity of looking like dogs, and we also go, oh, aren't they lovely and cuddly, and much of the time they are. Very expressive, you know, obviously being mammals, they're easier to work to get that expressive nature. You can capture moments. I think this is something that's important when editing pictures. It's not something you're necessarily going to see when you're shooting. Is that I went down on this dive with a fisheye with a teleconverter on to reduce the angle of coverage of my lens to be able to shoot vertical portraits of seals. But I didn't know I was going to catch a picture like this, where I happened to take a photo at a time when the seal had his mouth half open and it looks like he's laughing. But when we see images like this come through when we're editing our pictures, it's important to identify them, because often these quirky little things about a shot can make something that's a little bit more memorable and can give an animal personality that perhaps a different personality to it had at the time, and can give it a much wider appeal. It's important to look for these shots when we're editing. That can generate that sort of audience reaction and take our pictures up to a higher emotional level with our viewers. The most wonderful experience I've had, and there's at least a few people here who've had this experience too with marine with seals and sea lions, is the baby sea lions in La Paz in Mexico. And the most endearing thing about them is they pick up a variety of marine creatures, and the best of which are starfish, and use them as toys. And they race around playing with them, and you can just spend hours and hours and hours watching this. And it's the most fun thing. And I could watch this forever, and I could show you 20 or 30 pictures of this and talk about something else. But I must move on from my favourites and head on to manatees. Not necessarily the most wonderful creatures until you've met them, but they really are great creatures, and an opportunity again in shallow, calm, fresh water to create some very different types of images, working with Snell's window, working with reflections. So although they're perhaps not the most naturally good-looking creatures, they do live in an environment that can be very good for photography. And again, finding that quirky moment, you know, when something unusual is going on in a shot, and suddenly there's a little bit more personality there. The picture's got that something, a little bit something extra. I think this one of the turtle, it looks like he's taking a picture of himself. Yeah. So it's, you know, and it's those funny little moments that I think can, you know, ultimately it's just a picture of a turtle shot with a mid-range lens on a Red Sea reef. We've all had encounters like this. And then just moving through some of the other big charismatic creatures we can shoot, which obviously have that big impact factor, mantas, and I showed these last year. And stingrays too, you know, attractive creatures, and obviously trying to find aesthetically interesting ways to shoot them to create unusual and different images.